Hello, I'm Hal Canning. I'm a member of the Baton Rouge Orchid Society, and I've been growing orchids about 7 or 8 years. Patty Grenier asked me to demonstrate how I deal with the Phalaenopsis orchids. This is one of our foster plants that I believe Bob Blank got from Whole Foods, and I'm going to unpot it and repot it and show you what I do. Because I like growing them in a clear plastic pot because I can observe the roots and see what's going on. They don't have any holes in the bottom, so there's no drainage. I think it's very important to drill some holes in the bottom of the pot so these orchids can drain. So I've drilled holes with various sizes depending on what works. One of the things that works is a TopCon drill bit. It's made for masonry materials. Sometimes I'll just use a drill bit that's for ceramics and or cement. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I have to change it around. So let's take this Phalaenopsis out and inspect it. You can see the flowers are starting to fade, so it's time to repot it. I'll untwist the little wires that hold on the stake here, and I keep those because you never know when you might want to need that again. These flowers are starting to fade. They might last another couple of weeks, but it's time to repot. I have a pair of shears here, and I always like to spray them off with a little alcohol. May not be total sterilization, but it's doing a little bit. And I like to trim the old bloom spike off down to about the second node. Sometimes if a really healthy plant, it'll come out with a secondary bloom spike, but I also like to use these bloom spikes because I may need to wire the plant in place, and this gives me something to attach the wire to. So let's unpot this and see what we're going to find. You never know what you may find. The roots look pretty good, but what we do see is the sphagnum moss inside, and this tends to be a real problem. The commercial growers use this to hold water while they're trying to grow the plants, and that makes sense. But for us, this is going to end up holding too much water and the roots are going to rot on us. So I try to take all of the sphagnum moss and all of the old media out, which I'm doing rather easily on this one. Sometimes it's a big task and it takes you a while to do. I like to inspect the roots, inspect the underside of the leaves. I don't see any kind of problems with the underside of the leaves. I have a couple of rotted roots here, and I'm pulling all of the rotten covering off. And it looks quite good. That was an easy one to unpot. They're not all this easy. Then I'm going to rinse these roots. Got a hose here. I sometimes do this over an outdoor sink. For demo purposes, this hose and pan will work. As I say, on others, it's been a long task. It may take 10 or 15 minutes to get all the sphagnum moss and the old roots. That moss was quite dry, so it came off rather easily. There's a little bit more soft covering that I'm removing, but I don't have any real rotted roots on this one. It's quite good. I give it a good chance of making it. So now that I've got my plant ready, I don't see any problems with the plant at all. I'm going to take my new clean pot and size it to go in here. That looks a bit small. I'm going to go get another larger pot. I'll be back in a moment. I'm back with my fresh pot. I won't be able to take advantage of a clear insert for this one, but I do want to start by putting a few styrofoam peanuts in the bottom of the pot, and this makes the pot lighter as well as gives good drainage for the plant. Now I will secure my orchid in the pot, and I've got plenty of room for the roots to grow, and I'm going to fill it with my orchiata mix that I get from John and Tin at Louisiana Orchid Connection, and I just kind of fill the pot with the orchiata mix, shaking it as I go. Now you can see I need a little more bark. I don't want to smother the roots, but I want to give them some support. The plant seems secure. I think it will do well. I'm ready to water it and put it in the greenhouse. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. Are there any questions from the audience?
Sometimes people put other stuff on top of that orchid mix.
Like sphagnum moss on top?
Yeah, is that a no-no?
If you had a bad situation, you really felt like you needed some additional moisture, some sphagnum moss would be there. In my growing conditions, I tend to keep things too wet, so I don't want excess sphagnum moss on top. I'm happy growing in the straight orchiata mix that I get.
Speaking of too wet, how often do you water that plant?
I will water
Especially
this
right after you repot it.
I'm going to water this plant thoroughly right now because the mix is quite dry. And the mix that it came out of was also quite dry. So I'm going to water this thoroughly. And I will water this plant once a week. I have plants in the greenhouse, I have plants in my den, and I water them all once a week, and that seems to work pretty well for me.
What about that root that's sticking out? Do you need to get that down into the...
It's perfectly happy sticking out like that. It doesn't have to be in the media.
Okay.
We only grow the orchids for our convenience in a media. In life, this would be growing hooked to the side of a tree and get rain as it was in a rainforest. So I hope you enjoyed my demonstration. Have a nice day and happy orchid growing.